with independence, I think it's when it comes back to holding companies versus independence. Holdcos are everything to everyone. Independents are something to someone. And that is the definition of how I delineate the difference between holding companies and independents. And when you're something to someone, you're not everything.
Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander.
So today on the show, I'm very excited to welcome Alex Marshall, who is head of growth at Rain for Growth. So you have double growth in the name, which is always a good thing. Has really storied background in agency biz dev, and I'm really trying to make it a habit of having on people like Alex that have a background really in the trenches of like what it takes to grow an agency. And Alex has worked in all sorts of big agencies across the world. So I'm excited to hear his perspective. So Alex, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Dan. Glad to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get into things, would you mind giving some quick background on, your how you got to where you are in the agency space and so on?
Sure. It's been a storied career. I've been very, very fortunate with my journey. I've been in the industry about 20 odd years. I started back in the early 2000s in the digital space in London. I started when the likes of Overture and Morago and Mevo was such a thing in the search industry. So that shows my age. And I worked in the UK for about 6 or 7 years in kind of holding companies and independents, helping brands scale, notably in the digital space. In 2010, I was fortunate enough to kind of move to Singapore, to MediaCom, to oversee the P&G digital performance business. That was just fantastic. I can't say great enough things about my time in Singapore. Traveled around Asia once a week on a plane, different brands, different markets. Basically being an evangelist. If you think in 2010, in Asia, even in the US, like how nascent digital still was, and the likes of P&G and any real kind of like CPG brand who was looking to scale their investments still were very much brochureware in the digital space, very much kind of like having a website which was there for the sake of having a website. So my job was to evangelize kind of how to better use digital, how to kind of scale their investment there and get more performance from digital. So it's a great learning curve, meeting many people, relationship building throughout my tenure there, before moving on to another role in Asia Pacific with Dentsu to help scale their business there. That's really when I had my first foray into growth. That was back in 2013, helping to scale the business in Asia. Again, working across the region, living in South Korea for a little bit as well to help scale that market too. So again, different cultures, different experiences. But I always realized that you can't call this for global market unless you move to the US. The US is such a massive market, and it is the tip of the spear when it comes to everything entering the marketplace. So I was very fortunate in 2016 to be able to move with Dentsu to the US, to New York, and lived in New York for 6 or 7 years, 2 of which with Dentsu to help, again, scale their business in the US, in the performance side, before moving on to WPP with Mindshare in 2018, where I oversaw growth for Mindshare for US. That was my first foray really into a full-service integrated agency. And it's really learning about storytelling. I'd been historically focused such on a performance statistical sense that this is really when I opened my eyes around strategical thinking and storytelling and how that really resonates, especially when it comes to growth. When it comes to digital agencies and performance agencies, there is a real narrative of how you scale brands and how you tell your story in pitches in growth. Mindshare and WPP was the first time I really learned how to tell a story and why that's so important in the growth space. Fast forward to 2023, I realized I've done holding companies for almost my entire career. And it's great. You get the resources, you get the scale, you get so many great things in holding companies. But what I found is I wanted to kind of create something, help to carve out a vision and work with people who are passionate, have built it themselves. And the independent world really felt the right place to move. So to your point, I moved to Rain for Growth early in 2025, I believe it was, to kind of help to scale their business in the US as well. And again, the independents have such a passion for growth and a passion for what they believe. And I think that's what I wouldn't say lacking in holding companies, but what I really was seeking as my next point in my career. So great career in 20 years. And I feel like I've touched upon many aspects of the world and advertising as well. I was very fortunate.
That's great. And thanks for sharing that. We definitely have skewed more towards independence, like in our work and in the guests we've had on the show. So I'd love to get your perspective on that since you've been on both sides of the fence. Like, what do you think the biggest differences are between driving growth at a holding company versus an independent? Like, what does one do well versus the other? What are kind of the strengths and weaknesses between the two?
I would say, great question. I would say from a holding company perspective, they have the resources, the capabilities, and the expertise to pitch anything they want to. They can pitch from the highest of the highs to the lowest of the low spenders and anything in between, every category you could ever wish for. So they have a real luxury to be able to kind of expand the gamut, which is a great thing to have. And any client who comes to them, they can service their business. And I've worked on many breadth and depth from scale to category diversity on a holding company level. I think what differs with the independents is they aren't able to pitch every client. They don't have the capabilities. They don't have the resources. They don't have the breadth of knowledge in categories. Many of them are focused on specific areas and niches and have really deep expertise in those areas. So I think there's a real passion, especially when you work in a founder-led business, which many independents are. There's a real passion for what you go after and how you go after it and the way you pursue and storytell when you have a chance to connect with that client. There's really investment from the top down. And whilst that still is the same way in holding companies, the different feeling when it comes to independence and how they show up and the work they put in and the passion they show throughout the process. I think that's coming to me the way it slightly differs the holding company world.
That makes sense. And kind of connected to that, so you've worked across the world, you're working in Asia Pacific. What were the differences in terms of what went into building relationships and new business over there and the places you've worked versus, in New York or Chicago?
I think that one comes down to time. Relationships are unilateral globally. There is a need to connect. There's a need. If you look at marketing from a client side to the consumers and from an agency side to the clients we want to pursue, it's all about relationships and how you craft that story and how you connect in a deeper, more meaningful manner. For brands to consumers is then to buy, from clients to agencies is then to sign up and to be or the agency be their AOR or their partner. And I think it's all about relationships. But the difference is in Asia, I felt there was such a cut and thrust with the US. It's such a fast-paced market. It's a dynamic market. It's a market which doesn't sleep. It's the New York of the world. It keeps moving at this rapid rate and iterates and it moves. And everything which is new to the world comes out primarily in the US, more so. Again, China is a big kind of driver of many innovations. Many markets drive innovation, but I feel the US is the hub of innovation. And because of that, there's a real pressure to adopt that innovation and adopt that mindset and move at speed. And every CMO, I believe, every marketing lead is trying to keep up with that rapid change of the luminoscape of the marketplace. And therefore, relationships are hard to craft in the US because there's a constant need to iterate and to not reinvent yourself, but to find a new niche and a new way to communicate and a new way to sell, a new way to grow. I believe in Asia, there's a more systemic way of doing business. And when it comes to relationships, there is a value of time to accrue relationships and how you accrue them and the way you go about relationship building. And there's a natural way of building that over time. I think in the US, there was an expedited timeline to build relationships, an expectation that comes faster. And the time CMOs, marketing leads have is, I believe, less so in the US because of everything I mentioned before versus what I saw in Asia, where there is, I wouldn't say there's more time, but there's more value put on the relationships and the time that takes to craft and the value that brings versus the work itself, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. And I think it's hard to say all the reasons behind that. Singapore is obviously like a very developed country, but I've read a lot of the studies, and when you're in like less developed places and you don't have like as strong of a court system, then you have to fall back on like older trust signals, which are going to be like family, friends, kinship ties, and that kind of thing. So it could be that like maybe there's some inheriting of those trends, even if you have a developed country and like a court system that can build trust for business transactions. So, any thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right. I think, again, from my time in Asia, where I traveled around 14, 15 markets every single quarter and half year, you saw this diversity in the way that consumers leverage mediums and medias, from the rise of digital to the reliance in like in Indonesia or Malaysia on kind of like cords themselves and the linear TV legacy. To print being a big player in certain markets as well. It was a real diversity. And to your point, like the Filipino market, where family and friends and the word of mouth and trusted advisors within kind of core companions drove a lot of influence before influence was such a thing. there was a real diversity in every single market and how you thought about adapting your approach on a market by market level. And that also changed the way you worked with different brand managers. So again, my days with P&G, every brand manager in every market operated in a different way. P&G had a kind of a regional approach to how they kind of did business for their brands, but every brand manager in each market had a unique way of doing things. And to your point, dependent on the market dynamic and the mediums which were driving the growth of business, would define how the brand manager operated and how you then worked with themselves. There's a real case by case. When you have 16 brands on 14 markets, you can see there's a matrix you built around relationship building. It was not a one size fits all. It was real nuance for the marketplace you were working with. So I agree, it is dependent on the mediums which resonate and how that impacts the marketers themselves.
Yeah, that's great to know. Kind of tied to one thing that you said, and in the US, kind of more of this focus on niching and specialization. Maybe that's across the board. We're certainly seeing a lot of that. We often encourage it, to be honest, because I think that it's harder to build trust now because there's more options than ever. So there's, kind of more of the riches in the niches. On the other hand, and I think we've talked, before we threw on the recorder in a previous conversation about this, but like it can also be very limiting, right? And it can also stifle creativity. We've all gotten like what I call the flat leaf, curly leaf spinach objections as salespeople, which is like, this is kind of a drawn out explanation, but it's from Robert Cialdini. And the idea is he's talking about a client that is going down the sort of like skill stack with a prospect of like this prospects. Hey, do you work with CPG? Yes. Do you work with packaged goods? Yes. Do you work with packaged vegetables? Yes. Do you work with spinach? Yes. Flat leaf or curly leaf? And it's like at some point it's just tedious. So to bring this to a question, how do you run into that challenge? Where do you see it as empowering versus limiting when you're talking about like category experience and specialization?
It's so funny. It's a great question, because that is omnipresent in what I see day to day nowadays. It's become more and more prevalent. And I think it becomes more and more prevalent in the independent world, to be honest, because the larger scale holding companies and the brands they attract, there is a desire to work with a holding company and desire to find a big scalable agency who can help them grow regardless of their niches, because they are so category agnostic. They have such a breadth. When there's the agencies who are independents, that's where we face this challenge more and more. I think to your question, there is definitely a value in being category specific when it comes to regulated categories. You think about finance, you think about pharmaceuticals, things with a real highly regulated category dynamic, which really does impact how you can market for that brand and that advertiser, needs to be front and center for the advertiser. They need to have that checkbox checked for the agency to make sure they can comply with regulations, because they don't want to be educating the agency on how they do business and how they need to do advertising to onboard them and to move at speed, because again, speed is critical. So I think for regulated categories, it's incredibly important to have that experience. Healthcare, another big one as well. Medicare, another big one as well. But I think when it comes to QSR, or to your point about flat leaf or kind of curly kale, I think it makes no difference about the category experience when it comes to parallel categories. So if I look at local, prime example, many brands who have brick and mortar locations who are, for example, service-based, I'll make it up, let's call it auto-based, service-based brands have the same need as a QSR brand. It's driving to a local footfall or local physical location. So therefore, my QSR experience or my auto experience should be able to be recognized as valuable and relatable to their business needs. Whilst the brand might be in an auto space or in a QSR space, either or, they should understand there is a definite benefit of that experience. For example, a agency who has auto experience might come to a brand who's kind of pitching their auto business and say, here's my playbook. That's incredibly valuable to move at speed and saying, I can hit the ground running. Here's my playbook. Let's move fast. That's great. Sometimes it's helpful for a brand to come with a fresh perspective to say, yes, there's a playbook for auto. Yes, we recognize that you have a nuanced category, but we are experts in local. Here's our expertise in all the different local categories we've worked within, which is maybe not be auto. There's a fresh perspective to approaching the category, but also being mindful of what drives your business to come to a middle ground, to what we can see as a mutually beneficial growth engine for yourself and ourselves too. I think that's when the client actually needs to find the middle ground to see there is value in a diversity of opinion and diversity of expertise and experience in a relatively connective category like local, for example. So that's one example. But to your point about the different CPG brands, I think of it like that. And the way we tell a story is, if there is a brand who's very specific about a category, we try to find out what the business drivers are. It's about getting under the skin of the CMO, the head of marketing, to really understand what is their business challenge, business needs, business requirements, and then maybe link that to marketing too and say, right, I understand your needs. I understand what you're trying to achieve. I understand your barriers to achieve that. Here's our approach. Here's how it's tried and true and tested in other categories we've done for. Here's how we apply it to your business. To really kind of connect what we have done to what they need to do without being in their current category.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And there's the sort of like calculus of where can you be useful, but then there's also the calculus of like how big is this market and how much can you actually stand to do business with. I've talked about this stat a lot, but in the startup world, they have the classic TAM, or total addressable market, times ARPU, annualized revenue per user, is equal to or greater than 100 million. Now, like, an agency doesn't want to hit 100 million most of the time, but even if you could still use that to figure out, okay, we want to make this much revenue, there's this much market, how much could we actually realistically stand to do business with? And we've worked with, and there is a situation where the niching goes too far. We've worked with agencies that have honed in on casinos, or they've honed in on weird niches in medical. And then you actually look at the data, you dig up Sales Navigator, and you're like, there's not that many companies here. Like, this is a business, like, if you were a solo consultant, this could work. But as an agency, like, you need to expand out. So I think everything you're saying is really valid and useful. So to switch gears a little bit, you talk a lot about storytelling and the importance of storytelling within a growth context. And I'd love to dig into that, because I think we hear a lot about storytelling in a marketing context, and maybe it's, a podcast or a book, or it's this stuff that's kind of higher level, top of funnel. So I'd love to hear, like, how have you thought about and used storytelling within like a later funnel kind of sales or growth context, if that makes sense?
It does. And I think, to your point, I think marketing and sales is one and the same. If you think about it from like such an early age, you are taught to sing the alphabet. Why? Because that like rhythmic way of telling a story, which is singing the alphabet, makes you remember the alphabet. It's a really simplistic way. But and same goes for singing in albums and tracks and songs. You can sing a song. When a song comes on, a beat comes on, you can sing to that song. You can sing all the lyrics. But when the beat goes off, all of a sudden, you're like, what was that lyric again? What was the chorus? What was the verse? And you can't sing the song. But the beat all of a sudden helps to build a rhythmic motion in you, which you then start to remember the story and the lyrics in that regard. So when it comes to kind of sales and marketing, and what I do and we do is growth, is storytelling is the easiest way to create memory connections and to allow people to remember what you're saying. There's so many studies which are proven out where, while statistics and showing how you do the work and all the numbers behind the work and getting deep into analytics and proving out the value and, to your point, the ROI and the CPA, you can lose people, and clients are people. We always forget in marketing that we put our marketing hat on and take off a human hat, and actually marketers are human at their element. Of course we are. And I find telling stories resonates and creates that memory structure where they can remember you. It's not about being first or being last or even being the best. It's about being the most memorable. And the way you are most memorable is telling a story they can actually remember. And if you go into the ones and zeros and you forget you're talking to a human being who wants to connect, and again, to go back to relationships and trust and relevancy, when you're telling a story, when you're getting into rhythmic motion of telling a story, having a start, a middle, and end, and a proof point throughout, and connecting all the dots back and forth, and ensuring that connective tissue comes throughout, and they are able to follow that connective tissue, all of a sudden they remember every facet of that story, not just what you told them at the beginning or the proof point at the end or some of the stats you worked throughout the deck. They remember not only the story and what you walk them through and the value you bring, but they start to think about their business and say, this agency will help us take us from here to here, because we can see the natural evolution of how they're thinking versus being tacticians and being able to do the work. They think beyond the work and think about how they connect the dots and the story they can weave throughout those dots. So I think there's many ways of how storytelling empowers sales and growth. from a marketing side and from an agency growth perspective. But I think it creates that ability to remember and be memorable.
Yeah, what I like about what you're saying is it reminds me of something I heard from Roy Sutherland, who you might know, big agency, your fellow countryman,
Yeah.
and he talked about how in like B2B we go overly rational, and in consumer, we're fine with being crazy and pulling on emotional levers and stuff. But the irony that he brought up was that in B2B, there's actually more of a need for storytelling because you're kind of like coalition building. Like you have to get multiple stakeholders to go along with your plan. And then especially like I would imagine in your world or selling to a P&G, like there's probably a handful of people, if not more, that are going to have to buy into this decision. And you're not going to be able to make this like spreadsheet based rational argument or get on calls with all of them and bring them along in one by one. Like you're going to need some narrative plot line, some story to get everybody on board, as quickly and simply as possible. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and kind of like bring us to question, like, what do you think goes into that coalition building in this day and age? From
Really good segue, because I actually saw this morning, I was watching the CMO Uncensored podcast. Like yourself, I kind of watch your podcast, I watched their podcast and a few others. And that focuses a lot around breaking through and creative ways of breaking through. And there was one today around the British Heart Foundation, and I found this one fascinating. So the British Heart Foundation did a campaign to kind of educate people on CPR on a very basic function. And they said that historically, how would you define it? CPR is a very stressful time. It's a very functional task, and it's high pressure. So naturally, you would think about a very rigid communication of like, do this and don't do this and do this and follow through this, and very binary way of telling the story. What they did is they broke the rule book and they said, we need to build a rhythmic motion to kind of how this is done. So they brought in Vinnie Jones, and back in the day, Snatch and Lock, Stock and the Guy Ritchie films were blowing up in the UK. And they laid over the Saturday Night Fever, I think it was, or Saturday Night Live, Fever, sorry, soundtrack of Staying Alive. And he showcased to Vinnie Jones how you do CPR to the motion of Staying Alive.
Yeah.
And the different motions and how you press down 5 seconds and how you do that. And the creative director at the time who created the campaign said that he had so many phone calls from 999, kind of what you call in the UK, or not 911 in the US, of how many people called up when they were doing CPR and they said, I'm doing the Vinnie Jones. And the fact that people remembered how to do CPR, not from a tutorial of like step 1 to 3 to 4 to 5, that this lock, stock kind of pun skit around staying alive connected with them in their brain, and they created a story where they remembered how to do CPR from this rhythmic motion. So to your point around this binary way of telling a story in B2B and being very practical and pragmatic, actually sometimes throwing the rule book out and being creative in the way you kind of address things is the way you kind of cut through, because you do go against the grain.
Yeah, exactly. That's really good. And hopefully I can tie this to the next thing. But I think a lot of our listeners, they're either agency owners or they're new business leaders like yourself. And a lot of the business doesn't necessarily come from new prospects, although it can. We could talk about that. It also comes from, what we call these boomerang clients, like the ones that you might be re-engaging again, that come back to you that you've known for weeks or months or even years. Can you talk a little bit about your processes ahead of growth and like what you've learned for the years in terms of what it takes to like wake those people back up and re-engage them? I think a lot of what we all struggle with is like not having anything new to say, avoiding the, hey, just checking in sort of email. How do you sort of deal with that challenge?
Great question. I think it comes down to timing. We've created this kind of like framework, which the reason why I believe agencies are chosen from a brand perspective is trust. Simply put, they trust you to do what is right for their business. At the end of the day, when they hire an agency, it's their largest investment in marketing in general, in the business overall. Marketing is normally the biggest line item on the P&L as a total business outlay. So when a CMO makes a choice or a head of marketing makes a choice around choosing an agency, it is their career on the line, so to speak, or their role. They're putting faith and trust in an agency that they are the right agency for them. So they have to believe you are the right agency and they have a belief in you. And when it comes to your question, when it comes down to like connecting with these CMOs or heads of marketing ahead of time, timing is of the essence. Like to your point, you can spam and you can do outreach kind of time and time again, but we all know the AI slop is omnipresent, and reaching out once a week, to your point, of like just checking in, how you're doing, what's going on here, it isn't relevant. And I've read this morning, the average CMO gets 15 outreaches a day from agencies, from publishers, from tech, from measurement partners, 15 a day. Like I can't imagine being bombarded with like, look at me, look at me, look at me. So relevancy is the most important piece. Timing is important because you have to be there at the right time, but being relevant to their needs is just critical. And there's no point spamming consistently with AI slop. It's kind of knowing their business, knowing their challenge, knowing them as a person. Again, bringing back the humanity in what we do, and saying, we've seen this, we've noticed this, we've loved this work, even if it's an accolade. We saw this work, love the work. We do similar things. We'd love to talk in the future, but nothing right now. Just going to call out how great we're seeing your work right now, and want to kind of just say congrats. And you don't have to sell. You can talk to them as human beings and saying you're loving their work, amongst many things. So I think relevance is important, and your communication has to be relevant, whether it be a compliment, whether it be a sales pitch, whether it be the right time to communicate to kind of get onto their kind of list or roster for the RFP. Whatever it is, it's about relevancy plus timing, and then cultivating a relationship over time, using those two levers that you pull to build a relationship and build trust, which then ultimately wins the business.
Yeah, that's great. And I think this kind of weirdly ties back to that category experience, so that you kind of know the heartbeat and like what's going on. Like we're recording this on, Tuesday, November 25th, 2 days before Thanksgiving. So like everybody involved in e-commerce or, whatever is going to be in Black Friday, Cyber Monday chaos. So like you're probably not reaching out then. If you're smart, maybe you're sending them some kind of food item or something. If you know what's going on. So I'd love are there any examples of that you're willing to share from like your engagement with prospects and clients for stuff that's actually relevant, that kind of wakes them back up and feels like it's on the money versus just another email they have to wade through? And not to put you on the spot. Yeah.
No, of course not. I think AI is a gift and a curse. I know this is kind of an omnipresent conversation you have in your podcast, and we all are having. I think AI, from the slot perspective, when it comes to communications, is terrible. It just dilutes everything down. It makes everything feel generic. Again, going back to the CPR example with British Heart Foundation, that didn't come out of AI. No way in hell. So I think AI is diluting creativity. But what it does do, it makes you be able to kind of understand at speed and understand and create relevancy and connect the dots. So where we use kind of AI is really to understand their needs and requirements, or understand what they're doing in the marketplace right now and connect the dots. And then to form an outreach, which is personalized, which is relevant, which is timely. And again, I'm a believer in humanity. I really am. I believe this hard sales narrative, like look at me, look at me, look at me, is not the right way to do things. You've got to be complimentary and reach out with communications, which is not salesy, which is designed to be human in nature. So you hire this person, great hire. We've worked with him before. We saw you did this, fantastic work. Really focus upon what they're doing and not selling your wares all the time. And we use AI to really understand the movement of the kind of the brands that we would like to speak to, and to find ways, not even ways in, but find communications which are relevant and authentic to us. Again, we're not going to kind of reach out and talk to brands in a way which isn't authentic to Rain. We believe that we need to be authentic to ourselves, and we're founder-led, so we're very much focused on who we are as an agency and where our kind of foundations came from. So we take AI to enable us to kind of connect the dots in that way. But again, to your question, I think our outreach focuses on humanity and connecting ourselves to themselves in a human way.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing that I think a lot of our clients deal with, whether they're in an ownership position or in a biz dev situation, is just the time management, right? And like a lot of the times, the thing that messes everything up is not the doom and gloom. Oh, hey, there's nothing in the pipeline, although that's a problem too. It's more like we just won these however many new accounts. We're all heads down. Or on the biz dev side, is we just have these proposals come in, so I'm working all night on the proposal, and then the prospecting isn't happening. Which is an issue, because then that problem doesn't play out right away. It plays out, 90 days later or whatever it is. So I'd love to hear kind of tactically, like what's worked for you? Like, how are you sort of dividing up your day to balance like all parts of the funnel, if that makes sense?
It does. And I worked for a CEO. I won't name his name because he'll be kind of blushing if I did, but he really instilled into me this balance. And he said, I carve my day out into these quadrants, or these kind of sixths, or whatever he divided it up to. And you have to give time to these areas, these pillars, these tenets of the business, because they all drive business. They might not drive today, they might not drive tomorrow, but they all drive over time. It goes back to the Asia Pacific kind of experience that this relationship will cultivate over time. So you have to put the effort in it up front to see it pay off. We have a champ at our company who kind of oversees outbound prospecting, who sees this date time and time again. He will spend probably years cultivate a relationship, and the outreach at kind of year one in 2020 will see no fruits bared until 2024. But he will continuously reach out with timely communication to connect with the individuals, and so I mentioned before, just connect in a personal way. So we are front and center when the time is right. From my perspective, we did a similar thing as well. Now coming on board with Rain as well. It is making time in the day, and I would say probably out of my team side, my time, about 20%, 15% of our time is focused on relationships and prospecting on a day-to-day basis. Because again, this doesn't happen overnight. This happens over the course of days and months and years. And your pipe, to your point, may be dry for days and months and years. But over time, you'll start to see a gradual increase in inbounds and opportunities, because you cultivate a relationship. You built that time. And whilst in the US, as I mentioned before, time is of the essence. I think from my time in Asia, it really cultivated that it is worth investing that time to see the fruits bear down the line.
Yeah, and I think the thing that a lot of the agencies we talk to struggle with is going from a situation where a new business is unpredictable and coming in through inbound referrals. Because in those situations, they're seeing the tail end of the sales cycle, right? So they're seeing the prospect when when they're solution aware, when they're like, hey, we need to find an agency to solve this particular problem. And the main metric they're looking at that point is their close rate. So they're like, hey, we have great close rates. When the situation that you're talking about, which I think is the only valid way really to build a more reliable system, is getting used to other smaller wins along the way, right? Because it can't just be this binary, they either closed with us or they didn't. You have to be celebrating, like, I got the conversation with this person, they responded positively, I got a referral proactively, these other things. So to bring this to a question, can you talk, there's a million metrics we all can be looking at any given time. It can be absolutely overwhelming. What are the things that you like to look at to know that, hey, I'm on track here, or I need to adjust?
I think we're now in an age of analysis paralysis. I think it's so funny you mentioned that, is that there needs to be a data point to validate everything that we do, which I do understand. But actually, IPA and Les Binet, who I think is just a guru of this industry, and you probably know him well, went and talked about short-termism yesterday around the effectiveness of media and being so short-term in your kind of approaches to media, advertising metrics, KPIs, goals, and how you approach media overall. And that also, I think, connects and relates to prospecting and growth and what we do from that lens as well, is that we always need to validate what we're doing with an immediate metric. There's been engagement here, there's been a communication here, there's a response here. And I agree that we have to tangibly tie what we're doing prospecting to a metric which proves the value we're creating. But many things are intangible. The humanity, the fact that the connection you make with somebody inside, you can't measure that. You can't measure how much you mean to somebody from, like, I can see value in you in a year's time when there's a need for you. And that relationship over time is cultivated where that year comes down the line, and also you're first off the deck and you're first top of mind because you have built that relationship. There's been no real engagement. There's been no metrics to measure against that, but you have a belief and a trust that you spent time cultivating personal relationships, which are authentic. Very important word, authentic relationships you've built, not for the sake of salesmanship, but you've built something which you believe in and they believe in you too. And I think if I bring this back to your question, there's different ways you can measure intangibly and tangibly that relationship. It's more about how you work together. It might not be from a sales lead, but you spoke from a conference, you've helped them out, you've given them a quote, you've maybe given them a bit of free work as well to think about things, you've consulted for them maybe, you've worked with their team, you spoke to the team about what they're doing. Many things which are small things, levers that you can pull to show you're trustworthy, you have relevance, you've got a relationship. Again, there's 3 or 4 things I mentioned before: trust, relationship, and relevancy. times by timing. Those three things, if you show relevancy, you show you're willing to kind of invest and engage, not overtly, of course, but you're willing to give them time, and they can see the value in you and the business you work for. They then, over time, and when the right time comes in the timing perspective, will reach out to you first and foremost saying, thank you for all your help recently in the past. Would love you to kind of consider being our partner in this particular area.
Got it. That makes sense. And I think tied to that, you mentioned you have somebody on the team doing a lot with outbound. Would love to nerd out on that. I guess, like, what have you seen work lately for getting meetings with skeptical CMOs or whoever it is?
It's tough. I'm not going to lie. This market is tough. And I have the utmost respect for CMOs and their marketing leads on navigating this time. The marketplace this year has been tough. The macroeconomic factors have created such uncertainty in consumer sentiments, an all-time low, that there is an nervousness and an edginess to the marketplace right now. And everyone's kind of waiting things out. And we've seen that in spades this year. Q2, Q3 was very quiet when it comes to the marketplace. Q1 was good. Q4 is picking up again. But there is a real like wait and see mentality given what's happened with tariffs being one, but just sentiment overall. I think tariffs are the driving force. I think the sentiment in the marketplace, overall consumer sentiment, when that's down and consumer spending decreases, or there is question marks about consumer spending, brands take a step back and saying, let's just wait how things play out. So to your question about how you connect with CMOs and your outbound, it's tough. When things get quiet, as you mentioned before, the natural reaction is to quickly scale your outbound and to talk as many people as you can do to fuel the pipeline. But that goes against that human relevant narrative around focusing on what you can do for the CMO and how you can be a good partner to them. And what a good partner is right here, right now, is being supportive. It's not selling. It's about helping them where you can do. It's not pushing the agenda of what you want to achieve and what the agency can do for them in a way, which is still salesmanship. It's about being understanding what they're going through and helping them navigate without pushing the agenda too much. It sounds a bit of a loosey-goosey response, so apologies. But I think from a sales point of view, it is just working with the CMOs and working with them and building that trust and relationship over the next kind of 3 or 4 months where we come into the next calendar year and next fiscal year in April 26. So you are in a point where there is that trust being built up and you have proven out the value you bring as an agency and as a human being to that kind of individual and that person. So they can come to you when the time is right.
Yeah, I think we're seeing the similar things. What we've sort of instructed in our programs and what we're showing people how to do, in some cases setting it up, is like giving prospects another call to action other than just, do you want to have a sales consultation about hiring an agency right now? Because they're going to be playing that longer game anyway. And even if you get in when the timing is right, back to the trust thing, they're probably going to be hiring the agency they've known for weeks, months, or even years. So tactically, what does that look like? A lot of targeted referrals. So getting in through that transfer of trust in concert with this two-pronged approach, we call it, which is like, could you be looking at the thing you might be already doing and then using that to actually get prospect conversations? So what does that mean? Like thought leadership, if you're doing a podcast or written interviews or studies or anything, could prospects be participating in that? Could you be doing meetings before, during, and after the conferences you're going to? Most agencies go to conferences and it's all kind of a crapshoot. They don't set up meetings before, during, or after. Finding people that have some other meaningful connection. They worked for one of your best clients. They've now gone on to some other place. And all that tends to work a lot better than just cold, #cold. So that's what we're seeing anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what you speak about prevalently in this kind of podcast around the referral program and how that fuels more effective inbound. And I couldn't agree more. I think our biggest lead generation is referrals. And one of our proudest kind of achievements at Rain is that we have a large number of boomerang clients come back to us. And what I mean by that is clients will work for brand A, they leave brand A, go to brand B, and they say, we've loved working with you before. Can we come back to you now? Well, let's have a conversation about whether it's the right fit. This is my brand now. This is what we need. I know you for this. Talk to me about what you can do for my brand, given what I know and what I don't know about your business. And that trust, that trust that you've done great work historically, that you've built a relationship, is just so powerful when it comes to creating opportunities and scaling the business organically and effectively and efficiently. There's no time spent in pitching. There's no time spent going through a 3-month cycle. There is a quick process from start to finish. And because they know you, they trust you, they believe in you, and you're being a good partner from the beginning, that is a natural fit. And therefore they trust you. So I think from a boomerang point of view, we have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 clients who've come back from a boomerang perspective. And we have such a focus at Ray on our client service. I know it's cliche. I know everyone will say this, but there's the whole, and it goes back to the AI slop thing. The market is throwing so much to technology being the silver bullet to everything, whether it be a platform to optimize, whether it be AI to do creative, whether it be whatever to do automation through PM management and ad ops and data ops. Our belief is it's humanology. It's kind of like humans first, technology to support the human element of what we do. And I spoke a lot about humanity and how we think about it from a sales perspective. We have such a client-centric, client service focus first, that these boomerangs come back because that's our focus point. Michelle Cardinal, our founder, is such a client service woman, has instilled this into the agency since 28 years ago. But that's kind of the DNA we live and breathe by. And so we over-service clients and we over-communicate and we over-partner, because that's what clients should get. They should get a true partner who over-invest their time in their business, because their business is their career and we need to make sure we're supporting it in the adequate manner. So I think boomerangs and referrals are such an important part of how we scale and the value we bring from our clients to kind of enable that.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. Would you mind digging into that a little bit? So like when you were talking about getting referrals or maybe strategic partnerships, could go with beyond that in your career. What have you found to work for like being consistent and proactive as opposed to the usual just like waiting around for referrals to happen?
So when it comes to referrals specifically, as you mentioned before, it's finding a connection point from your current clients and respectfully working with them to see if they would refer a prospective client you're looking to speak to you if there is an opportunity, if there is value to be made. I think what we look for when we're doing the analysis, again, using AI to understand really what a client's pain point is if we believe there is a true value we can bring to client A, for example, and we have, or brand A, sorry, and we have a client we work with who has a connection point to brand A CMO at brand A, we will say, here's the work we do for yourself. Here's what we love to do for that brand. Do you believe there's a good opportunity to work with that brand? And if so, would you mind making an introduction to that brand? So that referral system is strategic in nature. We're not going to go out to every Tom, Dick, and Harry to kind of make that request. It is very strategic in how we think about the brands we want to pursue, because we can add value to them, knowing what we add value today and where our strength lies today, which is in the converged TV space. So that's from a referral point of view. When it comes to what I define as alliances point of view, again, I think alliances are there to be supplementary and auxiliary to your service line. So with independence, I think it's when it comes back to holding companies versus independents. Holdcos are everything to everyone. Independents are something to someone. And that is the definition of how I delineate the difference between holding companies and independents. And when you're something to someone, you're not everything. So where your strength lies, find auxiliary partners who are great at everything you can't do amazingly well or you don't do at all, and create alliances with those, saying, right, when you've a opportunity in client A and they want to scale to this service, or you need a co-pitch because you don't do this, would love to be a part of that conversation. And find where you have alliances with partners who can supplement what you do. And that could be from a geography point of view, a category point of view, a service line point of view, whatever kind of area you want to focus upon. Find those real strategic partners who you can help scale their business and can help also scale your business by working in partnership.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I like the something to someone versus everything to everyone framework. One thing that you said that is interesting, that's kind of that I agree with, and is part of our approach, is like the simplicity of like and sort of what we call the referral game changers, like being able to ask for a specific intro is a completely different thing to saying, do you know anyone? Right? Because a lot of the times, like the reason people aren't helping is they're just busy and you've given them a ton of work, versus like they can very tangibly help you by making that request. And I think a lot of the times the agency is scared to make that ask. They're worried what might happen. But the reality is, like, if things are not good, then it's good that you know that. And that's the worst case scenario, is you have information that, hey, this client's not willing to put their rep on the line for you, which is a problem. Or they are, in which case it's really not that hard for them. It's not that big of an ask for them to make a casual intro if you make it easy on them. It's not like you're asking them to re-up for, another 6-7 figure engagement. It's like, it's, 10 minutes of work or less, basically. So,
Exactly.
but it
And I
means
think
something. Yeah.
it comes down to the relationship you have. Again, it comes down to trust. If you've built a relationship on trust and service, and not a relationship built on commodity-based outputs like functional work versus true partnership. If you are just a commodity and not a trusted partner, making that ask is very different. If you are just doing the work and doing the motions and checking the box and giving them a report, again, talking about technology and AI and black box solutions, if you're just giving them an output, that is not a service. That is a commodity-based product. If you're providing a service to help them grow and saying, here's what's next, here's what's next, here's what's next, and helping them understand how you unlock growth at each step in the way, that's a true partner. And therefore, I think they will respect you more and value your partnership more when you're not asking them to make a big leap for you. They see the value. They see you're willing and able to help them grow and have helped them grow. And therefore, when you say client A and kind of brand A and client A, we love the intro in this regard. We see this value for their business. We've done this. You've seen this. Do you think there's a fit there? If they say no, fantastic. Thank you for the candor. Love the fact you've kept me honest and we won't pursue that. Now I know what you know. But if they say, actually, I can see the parallels there. I can see what you're trying to kind of achieve here. We'd love to help you because we trust you and we've seen great value from you. So actually, absolutely. And it comes down to that relationship and trust.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another thing that I think a lot about, which comes from John Maxwell, I think originally, is like the mirror test, right? And this has helped me a lot when I'm asking for referrals or testimonials or whatever it is actually having a lifestyle where you're giving those things just as much, if not more, as you're asking for them by default. So it's like, if you're not giving your vendors testimonials or you're not making referrals for partners or others that are non-competing that you can help, it's going to be harder for you to ask for those things. So it really helps to embody that and just to bring it into everything you're doing. And it makes everything else easier. I would love to hear your thoughts on that though.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it goes back to you're something to someone. And when it comes to like a client's got a need and you say, we can do that, but are you the best at that? Are you the best at that ask? We've come to you for X and you now need Y, but can you really do Y? And what we say is like, let's look what the best in breed for you is. We're happy to be a part of an IAT. We don't believe in trying to own everything. What we believe is the best work for the client. If that means bring on third parties and other partners, such as measurement partners and digital partners and audience partners and tech partners and whatever partners you can think of, we will find the right solution for the client based on their needs and not try and sell our wares on what we can make money from. Again, that serves no one at all, apart from a small snapshot of revenue for a short period of time. And when the client calls you out for not delivering, you lose that revenue straight away and you lose the trust that you've just built over years and years and years. So be honest with yourself. Define where your core strengths lie, what you can do, what you cannot do. Be something to somebody. And when you can't do the work to the best degree what the client's looking for, to your point, advocate for partners to show you are a trusted advisor to that partner, to that client, and to the wider marketplace, and saying, I advocate for these people. They're great at what they do. Would you like an intro?
Yeah, definitely agree. Alex, kind of getting towards the end of our time, we'll love to hear what are you excited about? Like, what are you working on over the next few months at Rain for Growth?
Excited about what next year brings. This year has been a challenge, but in a good way. I think I always say you learn from failure or you learn from adversity. And I think this year, I think every agency has learned from that space and kind of what you need to do to go out from the other side. I think when it comes to Rain and kind of what comes next, we have built our business off I would say call a converged TV or a video model where we believe that video is the medium to help brands truly scale and unlock growth. And I'm excited to kind of like really unpack that story in a way which becomes more tangible to clients and they can really see the value and what really that means for their business versus being an internal narrative and a sales narrative. I believe truly that the landscape shift and what we're seeing from consumption and how the medium is really driving impact. I'm looking forward to really unpacking that story with clients into 2026.
Yeah, that's really cool. And with that, where can people go to follow what you're up to and get in touch?
Well, my name's Alex Marshall, and we're a converged TV agency which helps brands scale and unlock your next stage of growth. So, Dan, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really love the conversation and the referral narrative that you speak to and what you embody is everything we kind of truly believe in too. So it's a great mutual passion we both have. So thank you for the invite today.
Likewise, Alex, really appreciate it. And hopefully we get a chance to do it again. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dan.